The impact of our diet extends beyond basic nutrition, influencing the complex interaction with hormones. According to dietitians, factors like the texture, the quantity, and even the duration of eating contribute to a nuanced hormonal response. And it's not just about the type of food, but also the overall eating experience, similar to a musical composition, if you will. So how exactly does the food we eat affect our hormones? Well, to answer that question, we're joined, of course, by a registered dietitian and founder of Nutrition Wellness Dieticians, Omy Naidoo, for this discussion. Omy, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I think that what we tend to do in this country is, especially, and you'll hear it from some of the older generations in your families, you know, we say a lot, oh, the food these kids are eating are changing the development to their bodies and impacting their hormones. Is there some truth to what we're hearing?
Good morning, Naledi, and thanks for having me on the show, and good morning to your viewers. Yeah, you know, the wisdom from the elder generation is no doubt true. The science is abundant that our modern Western diet is causing havoc with our hormones. If we look at why and how, essentially your food contains nutrients, and nutrients play an important role in the production, the metabolism, as well as the detoxification of hormones. So if we're not getting the right nutrients, this then affects this orchestra of hormones and how the systems in our body work. So if you think of this orchestra being disrupted by an off-tune instrument, this is exactly what's going on in our body.
And so when we start looking at, you know, I mean, more and more we're getting genetically modified foods, and you know, we're not eating off the land, right, like our perhaps our parents and grandparents used to do a lot more. Does that impact, have we seen more, I suppose, hormones pumped into our bodies through some of those changes?
Yes, absolutely. And when we look at the Western diet, it's very much red meat based. There's not a lot of fiber in it, and we're not eating off the land, as you say. But just to take a step back, we've got to remember hormones control different systems in the body.
Yeah.
And the systems include your reproductive system. So that's your fertility and how are you doing as a male and female. It also affects your metabolism, and this is why we're seeing this uptake of obesity and diabetes and heart disease, as well as our immune system. So there's a big surge in autoimmune diseases where our own immune system is firing up on its body systems, causing more diseases. So telling us what we're eating is essentially the part that we could modify our risk for all of these conditions.
Yeah, so talk to me then about what some of the foods we need to be avoiding then are, right? What do we need to be staying away from?
Okay, so the most studied diet is the Mediterranean diet as well as the anti-inflammatory diet. And what this essentially means is we want to stay away from refined carbohydrates. So by that I mean white bread, white rice, white pasta. You want to try and have the brown variations. You want to have plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, and substituting those fresh fruits and vegetables and having that in your diet rather than processed foods. We know that processed foods increase inflammation in the body as well as it damages hormone production. So processed foods are no. And then as opposed to having a lot of red meat, which is pro-inflammatory, rather having things like fish, but more often plant-based protein, so beans, peas, and lentils. Essentially, you want to try and have more of a natural diet, and this has been shown to improve disease outcome, but also support hormone function. You know, a typical example is studies show us that when you have excess red meat in a patient's intake, what happens is that this increases the estrogen levels in the body, thereby increasing the risk for breast cancer and uterine cancer. So yes, I just said that what food choices you are making on a daily basis affects your hormones. And we know that when hormones don't function optimally, that's when we get the beginning of disease.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a little disappointed because you mentioned some of my favorite foods there, honestly. Okay, so let's talk about what we can do right. I'm a big avocado fan. I'm told that that's really good for hormone production.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, as opposed to advocating specific foods, because some studies show some benefit, some studies show less benefit. What we can do is we can advocate for food groups instead. So, you know, as I mentioned, plenty of fresh fruit and veg, no matter what type of fresh fruit and veg it is. As I also mentioned, high fiber grains, so brown bread, brown rice, anything with a lot of fiber has been shown to reduce inflammation as well as prevent the disease development. And then also the main thing here is we're trying to think about how do we incorporate nuts, seeds, beans, peas, and lentils. The evidence is abundant that those that are going to be adopting plant-based eating, so more of your vegetarian eating, these are people that are going to outlive the rest of us. So the evidence is there that in terms of lifespan, in terms of cardiac disease, and in terms of hormone function, a plant-based diet is definitely far more optimal.
Yeah, I've always wondered, how does one actually, check on themselves and have that checkup to say, well, do I have a hormonal imbalance, and perhaps even be given recommendations of what to put into my diet? I mean, the importance of doing that and where we go about doing that.
So I think there's still a bit of a mismanagement or a broken link between a primary care doctor doing a blood workup on a patient, finding some abnormalities, but the first line is never ever to refer to a dietitian to get the diet sorted out. We are very much a generation that let's rather go with pharmacotherapy or medical management, but essentially we're not getting to the crux of these issues which can support these hormone productions. So an example is with fertility. Testosterone levels have been seen to be improved significantly and improve male fertility when adopting certain dietary approaches. The same for estrogen. So these are things that where the evidence is abundant that the food choices affect your hormone levels. So the starting point would be having that conversation with your primary care doctor.
Yeah. Is it possible that a hormone imbalance can also lead to a mental illness, right? And we need to talk a little bit about that. The link between what we eat, how it impacts our hormones, and also how it impacts our mental health.
Absolutely, and this is a big topic with the surge of mental health issues throughout the world. And we've got to take it back one step to understand that serotonin, which is our feel-good hormone, is produced in your gut. Meaning that if you don't have a healthy gut, if you're not taking in good fibers, if you've got an imbalance of good bacteria versus bad bacteria, this then affects the production of serotonin, and hence we have increased incidence of depression, anxiety, and various other factors. There's also studies showing us that diets that are very high in sugar and caffeine, these patients end up having more anxiety. And when we look at these patients and you evaluate and then put them onto a low GI diet, you seem to have resolved the sort of anxiety or reduced the symptoms. And the reason we look for diet as an add-on therapy for mental health issues is that we really are struggling to get a cure, or we're struggling to get patients into 100% remission on medications alone. And this is why the innovative psychologists and psychiatrists are working with dietitians to say you'd be on a medication, you'll have psychotherapy, as well as we're going to identify the trigger foods that's worsening your mood.
Yeah, and what's this about the experience of eating? Because, this is what I'm reading here, that what is on the plate is just as important as how you consume it.
Absolutely, and this talks to a topic that I've been doing a lot with the media, and it's essentially mindful eating. It's where we give ourselves the space to actually process that meal, to savor the meal. How often do you sit in front of a TV, you open a packet of chips, a large one, and before you know it, you're touching the bottom of the foil? That's mindless eating, which is the exact opposite of what we as healthcare professionals are advocating. Remove distractions, become more in tune with your hunger and your satiety. How often are we eating, and whatever's the portion, no matter how big it is, we're still completing it as a sign of respect to our host. But this is where mindful eating comes in, and it's been clinically shown that when we listen to our body's cues of hunger and satiety, out of interest, hunger and satiety is controlled by a hormone called leptin. So again, in tune with hormones that we talk in today's topic. So mindful eating is something that's getting a big interest in the world, and it's just about removing distractions and becoming more in tune with that meal.
Yeah. Anything for mums to be thinking about, particularly for their kids, and we can talk about the various age groups that you think are important to highlight?
So I think with mums, it's trying to achieve a natural diet, but something more important is knowing that the first 1,000 days in a child's life can have magnificent or detrimental effects to their disease burden later on in life. So we're seeing that early introduction of cow's milk leading to allergies later on, leading to obesity. Breastfeeding is still something that's advocated. And also we're trying to look at exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months has got the benefit in terms of immune function, child development, mental health, all sorts of things. So, essentially trying to get back to as natural as possible, and knowing that we do understand time is always a constraint. But every time we opt for that takeout or that processed meal, we're losing an opportunity to nourish that child with the right nutrition.
Right. Right, Omy, you've given us a lot to think about. And just before I let you go, maybe give us somewhere to go for us to continue doing our research, perhaps a resource that you can share with us?
Absolutely. Our practice website is www.dietitians-sa.co.za. That's dietitians-sa.co.za. Tons of free information. And, we can always reach out to patients via 033-342-1146. We're seeing a growing trend of virtual consults where people are consulted from the comfort of their home.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that. Reminding us once again to stay healthy. Omy Naidoo, dietitian and founder of Nutrition Wellness Dieticians. Thank you so much for speaking to us.